I lived on the farm, and of course I was small then, but we lived on a ranch. My dad was actually probably pretty well off at one time before the Dust Bowl hit. And he had a lot of machinery, a lot of land, a lot of ranch and cattle and machinery. And when the Dust Bowl hit, the dirty 30s, I call them, of course, he couldn't raise feed for his cattle. He had show cattle, and he was a breeder of Hereford cattle, and he sold cattle all over the country out in the West. And of course, when the dirty 30s come, why, I call it dirty 30, you call it Dust Bowl. It's the same. Why, he couldn't raise feed for his cattle, and little by little, in the spring he would borrow money to buy seed to put in the ground. Well, it didn't grow. In the midsummer, when it should be pasture, why, he'd haul his cattle off of the ranch down to Prittner into Minnesota, to where there was feed, and he'd, in the fall, he'd haul them home again, and then he'd borrow money again to buy feed to feed them all winter, because he was a good farmer, and the bank, he got along with the bankers. Well, he got himself in debt. He borrowed money against the land to feed his animals. And of course, after that, the cattle starved to death, and the government bought them. What do you do when you can't raise cattle anymore on all that land? What's your next step down? He's a farmer. He isn't going to quit. You see, that's where the dirty 30s come to me. And you sell the cattle, what you got left, and buy sheep. Sheep can graze a lot closer to the ground. Okay, after a year or two, the sheep can't live because there's nothing to eat. The only thing left is the grasshoppers, and they eat the plants right into the ground. Well, what's your next step down? I ain't going to quit. You raise turkeys. Turkeys can live on the grasshoppers. They'll spread out for half a mile long, and you know, single line. And if a grasshopper tries to jump over that line, they jump up and get it. They'll jump 4 feet high to grab a grasshopper in air. And in '36, the grasshoppers were gone off of our ranch, and so the turkeys migrated to the south, down towards Washington Springs. And we lost them. We didn't know what happened to them. Well, they grazed out so far they didn't have time to get back at night. And they stayed there, and they were gone all summer. Well, in the fall, along in October, well, September, October, those old hens, they come home with their brood. And we got one evening, they come in, and there was 200 turkeys in our yard. Wow. That we hadn't seen all summer. And so Dad, he went to town and bought some corn and put around the barn, and put a snow fence up around, and he boarded up all the windows in the barn, and we kept feeding them closer to the barn door. And one night after school, we made a rush, and we got them all in.
Yeah. So was that what ended up working out? Was the turkeys, or did he move on?
Oh no, that was our last year. If you can't raise the turkeys, how far down are you going to go?
Yeah. So what ended up happening?
Well, then my brother come home from the School of Mines out in Rapid City, South Dakota, and he was a good student, and he was up to date because he was in college. And when he come home, Dad talked like he was going to quit or leave or do something. He didn't know what. But he says the new frontier is northern Minnesota. Dad had a ranch located out in the Black Hills that he wanted to buy, but Wayne said, no, that's dry out there too. There's nothing out there for you, Dad. The new frontier is northern Minnesota. Well, we hopped in our old 1925 Dodge, and made a trip up to Brainerd country and up this way, and we settled at Solway, Minnesota. It's just west of Bemidji. And we paid $25 down on one farm and nothing down on the other farm. We bought a complete farm, buildings, well, a whole bit, with nothing but a handshake. That's how tough it was in the 30s. That was in the fall of 36. I think our turkeys come home after that trip. But anyhow, we had enough money to get to Minnesota. We moved to Minnesota, and of course we lived on fish. There was no limit on fish. It took 3 to fish. The boats leaked, so you need somebody to bail, and the other one had to row, and the other one fished.
Oh, there you go.
And we lived on fish and rhubarb that first year.
So how old were you when all this was happening?
I was about 11
11.
when we moved here.
And how old were you when the Dust Bowl hit then?
Well, the Dust Bowl hit in about 32 or 33. 33 for sure. 34, 35, 36, 37. Well, I can remember walking up from the house to the barn. It was a long ways away, a long ways the yard, and the ground was so dry that when we lived in this ranch, I'll show you some pictures of it. It was way down deep, and down there we were protected pretty much. And there used to be a river there at one time. Well, there was trees along that river, and as I walked towards the house, why I could see this dirt rolling just like in that picture, and I think either that time or another time, it sprinkled just a little bit. And the drops of water would stand on top of the dust. They wouldn't soak in because it was too dry to soak in. Just like you'd put a drop of water in a cup of flour. It just stands right up straight.
Wow. So you describe the experience of seeing this outside. I mean, I can't imagine what.
Oh, I've seen many of them, many of them. Now, up on the farm, Dad had 2 farms. He had the ranch and then he had the farm. Well, the farm was a show farm where he could sell his cattle along the highway. And he would take his cattle and herd them over west of the ranch on the rangeland. And the wind come so hard, it blew the roofs off of the buildings, some of the buildings, because that was up in the flat. Down in the ranch, no, we didn't have any big problem with wind because we were down in that draw. It just comes rolling, and you can see it. There's blue sky above, but this dirt is up probably 500-600 feet or whatever, I don't know. But it just comes rolling. And of course, we go in the house because it's going to get dark. The chickens will all go to roost at 3 o'clock in the afternoon because they go to bed when it gets dark.
Now, when you first saw this, the first time you ever saw this Dust Bowl, did you know what it was?
No. Well...
When you saw it, what did you think it was?
Yeah. Well, there was no fear. The folks weren't scared of it because they knew it was coming, and it was just an everyday experience. So we didn't talk about it. But there was no house good enough to keep the dirt out of the house. The dirt is fine. It's just as fine as air. And you could play a game of cat on the table every 15, 20 minutes. there would be that much dirt coming into the house. And we had stuff, wet rags around the windows and doors and stuff to keep the dirt out, but you can't keep it out because it's just as fine as air. Oh no, the house looked clean. But then it would be that way again in 15, 20 minutes. My dad breathed in so much of that dirt when he was herding cattle back over the hills. And of course, that's what really got him in the end, because he inhaled so much of that dirt. I can remember he had these show cattle, and he didn't want to part with them because they were worth some money at one time. And he set up a tripod and put the cows would go down, couldn't get up, and he'd put a belt underneath them and lift them up and get them on their feet one more time. Well, my brother and I, and the hired man, he was a young fellow, probably 20 or so. Yeah, it's funny you ask that question, because we had what we called the 7-year itch. But we had the 7-year itch. We just scratched all the time. You know, we did. And we had it for about 5, 6 years. And then when we moved to Minnesota, it was a different climate. We had green grass and we had rain, and we got over that itch. My dad always coughed a lot, and he went to the doctor when he was 60 years old or so, and the doctor x-rayed him. And a couple of days later, he called us up on the phone and says, "Come in here, we want to take some more pictures." And about 1/3 of his lungs, they said, according to the x-ray, it would be just as hard as stone. Because, and that's the reason he coughed, because he couldn't get enough air to breathe.
Wow. And they said that was related to him inhaling all that dust?
Yeah, it's inhaling all that dirt.
And it never got out of his system?
No, well, it was the same way with the cattle. They would have 5 gallons of mud in the bottom of their stomachs. A cow has a stomach of about 55 gallons. And that weight of that mud in the bottom, it wouldn't digest.
Right.
And of course, when the veterinary would open up an animal, why, there'd be a 5-gallon bucket of mud in the bottom of his stomach that wouldn't pulsate. I do know a fellow over here at Solway that come to Minnesota under the same conditions about 1930, 33 or so.
Did that seem like where a lot of people ended up moving to was up here because of that?
Solway they didn't never get it organized because times were hard in the 30s. And but we could have a Solway reunion, and there'd be a dozen people come to that reunion that all come from our part of the country. Now, why we all come here, most of the Grapes of Wrath, they all went west. My cousins all went west. All of our neighbors went west. So they were in on that Grapes of Wrath. And that's my life story. Home life, you know, the things that they went through, the things that they pictured. Back where my dad would take the cattle and go back and run them on the range to pasture, that's where this guy come from, just a little beyond where we pastured.
Okay.
So my dad knew him in Dakota. But everybody from Solway seemed like
they knew each other, right?
Moved to northern Minnesota. Well, my brother that went to the School of Mines in Dakota, he took up electrical engineering. Well, that was when nobody had lights, nobody had electricity. Now he made himself a radio, and it was a coil of wire, and it had headphones. And a big old car battery sitting on the floor on a magazine, because it'd be acid in that old battery.
Right.
And I could put them headphones on, and I could run that wire across that coil, and I could hear radio stations.
Wow.
And we had an old ringer telephone.
Uh-huh.
Now there's a little story that I think is unique. I can remember the fall of 1929. Now that's one of my first memories. Mm-hmm. I thought of something the other day about my teddy bear. I had a yellow teddy bear, and I was sitting at home. I was under the weather, mm-hmm. and I was bumping my teddy bear on my knees. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden he squeaked. And that teddy bear had a squeaker in him. Oh. And he was so old, I pretty wore him out before I found that he had a squeaker. But in '29, my mother that was up on the farm where the show farm. Mm-hmm. I was out under the willow tree playing in the dirt with my toys, whatever they were. And mother come running out of the house and hollering at Dad. And she was screaming at him, and he was down at the barn, and he was leading some animals out of the barn to the cow tank to water them. These cattle were nice; they were tame and nice. And she met up with him. Why, I never seen her holler like that. She had some news, and that was the afternoon that the banks closed. And she told him that the banks, she'd heard it on the grapevine, you know, the telephone line, 4 or 5 people on a telephone line, mm-hmm. and that the banks had closed. And he stopped, and I don't know what he said, but anyhow, he didn't have any money in the bank because he had it all invested in the land and machinery and cattle. But when you have cattle, you know, like I said, what happens when you can't raise cattle? You raise sheep. Can't raise sheep, you raise turkeys. Right. So it took him another 6 years. He lasted longer than anybody else. Mm-hmm. But he lost it all. And when we come to here, why, all we had was a few railroad cars full of old machinery, right. and a few horses.
Was he pretty, what was, I know you were young, but obviously, do you think the feelings going on in his mind when he, you know, had to keep buying different animals? I mean, did he seem like he really lost, pretty down on his luck?
My dad was a man of faith. He believed in the Bible, he believed in God. And he knew that God would take care of him because he's read enough stories in the Bible of the people that were in problems, had problems. And they survived, and they lived, and the Lord took care of them. And that's the way I am here today. Mm-hmm. I just live one day at a time because I can't do nothing else.
And do you feel like that's a lot of what people were doing then? They were just trying to get by each day and not...
A lot of people at that time, I think, were Bible-believing people. But when they left, when they didn't have nothing to support the church dried up and blowed away too. The land was their living. And you don't like to leave that. It's your livelihood.
Yeah.
He was 50 or 55 years old when he moved to Minnesota. He started all over. He had all that land out there, and then come up here and he bought one 90-acre farm, another 80-acre farm. And yeah, that's just too small. We spin our wheels on that. Yeah. There'd be nothing left. We got our whole life work invested in building that land up and getting it nice.
So was leaving it must have been hard.
That would be hard. Just like I just said, Dad was 50 or 55 when he moved to Minnesota. Left all of that stuff behind. He had 2 new barns, one barn for show cattle, and the grasshoppers ate the paint off the walls.
Did you guys ever go back?
I was back there in '35 with my family. My boys were small, and I wanted to see the ranch, and they wanted to see the old ranch, and we got pretty near up to where the buildings were, and then we walked in, and the barn, somebody had moved the barn. The old house, the house was gone. I've got pictures of it there. And I went back for one purpose. When the dirt blows off of the field over that valley, it's just like snow. It deposits a snowbank along there. You know what I mean? And then it makes a snow drift, or a dirt drift. And then if you did happen to get some snow in the wintertime, which you didn't, there'd be a layer of snow in that bank. And in June, when the school was out, they always come out to the ranch to have the picnic, because we had all them trees for shade, you know, and a good picnic ground. And you could see this water of the snow melting in that heap of dirt, and it would run wet streaks down, and we would go up there and dig in that ice and take it down and make ice cream.
Ice cream, huh? You did this as a kid?
What?
You did this as a kid?
As a kid?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I didn't climb up there because that was too high. But yeah, the men would go up there and dig the dirt off. There'd be maybe that much dirt on top of this. The snow would turn to ice, and it was insulated, and it was there in June. The ice was, and we'd get several sacks of that and take it down and make ice cream out of it. And we had a lot of advantages that a lot of people didn't have, because we had those trees in the bottom of the ravines.
So that's a fun memory you had then?
Yeah.
During the harsh times?
Yeah, and of course we had, there was big trees there, and we'd have swings in the trees, you know, for the kids to play on, and pretty humble life, but then we lived. We lived. No, we didn't realize it. You know, the folks, they fed us, and we had a place to sleep, and we played.
So your parents must have kept a good face then.
Oh yeah.
They show a lot of.
Yeah, they had faith in that the Lord will take care of them somehow. Didn't know how, but we live by faith. We don't know. You trusted that chair, and you don't know whether that chair is going to hold you, but you sit down in it, so you got faith in the chair. See, that's what faith is. Faith is different than believing. You can push the chair over here, and you believe it's going to hold you, but until you sit in it, then when you test it with faith that it's going to hold you. I had pretty as many cattle as he had, because I didn't need the money. He was buying the groceries, and so then when he passed away, then I bought the farm, and I farmed for 25 years. And then after that, my back was bad, and I couldn't get out of bed for 3 months. And I turned the cattle over to my wife and my boys, and they did it was a dairy farm.